Hello people, it's Gunk. I want to preface this video by saying that this is entirely off the cuff. So it's not gonna be the most well-structured or well-said video in the world. I just kind of felt like talking about this, so I made this video. Um, I might edit it down, or edit the audio down. I'm not like super sure yet. Uh, I guess you'll find that out when when you're seeing this video. I probably will end up cutting this down a little bit. Something in my throat. But anyways, this video is about my worst day in a This video is about my worst day in the psychiatric hospital that I was admitted to. I won't get into like the specific details as to why I was there, as it's not super relevant. What is relevant is that I was a minor at the point that I made at the point that the story occurred. So I was in the wing of the psychiatric hospital meant for minors. That is a bit relevant. But either way. So first of all, to kind of paint the picture, um, of what this place was like, uh, since I imagine most people watching this haven't had experience, um, essentially, the average day was waking up in your room, which you had a roommate. You did have a roommate. My roommate was fucking ass for most of my time there, though I did get a better one later. Um, and from there, you had like about like around like 10-15 minutes to like get ready for the day, brush your teeth, what have you. Um, Worth noting that all of your possessions were taken away from you for your duration of the time you were admitted. So like no phone, no anything. Um, so fun. Uh, and I would basically then go to this room, this like closed off. It's very honestly way too small room. There were like two rooms that basically there were like two groups in the hospital, the men and the women, which I think but by law they were very very strictly separated, because there were too many incidents. I will say I won't elaborate. um I will not elaborate on what those incidents pertain to, but there were incidents, too many, so many, that it became law that men and women in these facilities, at least I think in for minors, had to be separated very strictly. And so there were two rooms, one smaller room and one bigger room. And basically, um, we would kind of just like swap off between the rooms, between days. There were a lot more women for some reason for the specific time that I was there, so oftentimes they just kind of got like priority for the bigger room for obvious reasons. Both of the rooms were too small. I will just say that, especially for cramping a bunch of extremely mentally ill teenagers into a room, and for my case, teenage boys. Which, by the way, I'm not saying mentally ill as an insult. I'm also extremely mentally ill. I'm just kind of saying it wasn't the best environment to be in 24/7. I mean, we would have times when like we would go outside for a bit, and that was nice. But and we would have time to like go to like there was this cafeteria area, and there was also this gymnasium, which will become relevant later. Um, but either way, you would go to these rooms. You spent the vast majority of your time there. Again, there are instances of other places where we would be, that I just explained, for like just brief periods throughout the day. Um, and Basically, what we had to occupy ourselves with was whatever the hell was in the room. There were some stim toys, which was cool. There were like playing cards, some board games, some like you could get paper. You were allowed to get paper if you asked for it. They actually gave you like a folder for you to like keep like drawings in, or like if you wanted to write whatever. That was most of my time spent in there, was just like doodling on paper with like a marker. No pencil, no pens. Very strictly not allowed because it's too dangerous. Or at least I think it's too dangerous, which, fair enough, I guess. Um, and I actually still have that folder. They let you keep it because what the fuck are they gonna do with it? I guess. Uh, Maybe I'll release some of that stuff at some point. I think some of it's kind of interesting. But anyways, I'm kind of rambling off on irrelevant stuff. There was like a staff member that would be in the room at all times, kind of supervising. They would like swap off. Uh, Most of them I liked. Most of them I liked. There were like one or two that I was kind of iffy about. But overall, I liked most of the staff there. I've heard a few bad things about them from other people. I can't comment on that, though it did seem kind of shitty and real. Nothing like horribly like it's not like any of the people working there were like pedophiles or anything. But like, although one guy was a little weird, Marco. Um, but we won't get into that. Either way. And then we would go about that. Every now and then you would get pulled aside to do like a therapy session, like every few days, like a short one. There was also like some just general counseling of like, yo, at like the end of each day of like, yo, um, what were your thoughts on X, for like 1 through 10? Like, have you had thoughts about like committing suicide, self harm, whatever? Have you acted on anything? Whatever, whatever. You would then get your medication if you took it. Um, and then you would take a shower, and then you would go back to your room. Well, the shower was in the room, but whatever. And then you would go to sleep and rinse and repeat. I was pretty okay with most of the kids there. I have a nice trait of, even though I'm very socially awkward, I'm very outwardly inoffensive, like just generally to like everyone. So I don't. There's pretty rare that there's someone who has like an issue with me. And so I was generally pretty fine in the social department during my stay there. Um, but anyways, now that I've kind of set the stage of what this place was like, um, I can actually start talking about the topic of this video, which is my worst day there. Um, so the day started, and we went to our room, or no, we woke up, we did our stuff, and then we went off to the room. Um, and for some reason, I don't know why, but I just thought in my head like today's gonna be shit. Like I genuinely thought that, and I don't entirely know why. I just felt like it would be, because it's not like I was super overly pessimistic during my entire time there. I mean, yes, I was already kind of there for like a week. At this point, I was getting very tired of it and homesick. Which this is very relevant to the story, by the way, was my kind of irritation of being there. Um, and being there for so long, considering oftentimes stays last between like 5 to 7 days, and I was already kind of reaching the point where like, hey, I should be out of here probably. I stayed longer than most people. I stayed about a week and a half or to 2 weeks. So it's like week and 4 days, week and 5 days. I don't remember the exact number. It's irrelevant. But either way, I just thought to myself, today's gonna be ass. And I was very right about that. Um, I didn't know it at the time, but I very much so was. Um, and essentially, what happened is it was relatively normal most of the day. Like at first, like during the morning, it was kind of like whatever, normal routine stuff. But then there's this kid, right? I don't want to like give off any like real names. I don't even remember most of the names of the people there. But there was this kid. We're gonna call him Chuck for the sake of the story. We'll call him Chuck. Um, and Chuck is severely autistic. And this is not, again, I'm not using it as an insult. Whenever I say stuff like this, by the way, don't take it as an insult. This is me just stating a fact. I hate the culture of this being used as like an insult, and so it's kind of assumed to be an insult. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying this just as a simple fact, just neutral. He was very autistic. Um, and he was, yeah, I won't get into the specifics of the problems he dealt with, but it wasn't very good. And generally speaking, he was a very sweet kid. I never really had any problems with him. Like, yes, he would get pretty overbearing at times. He was very loud, very hyperactive. Yeah, but like obviously, he's autistic. It's not his fault. Um, but like either way, it was a little bit annoying at times. But generally speaking, everyone kind of understood that like, yo, this is like a problem that he's dealing with, and so it was okay, right? But today was a little odd. Um, so I'm not fully sure what happened. He might have been faking this, which by the way is not me assuming. I would never just assume something like that. That's disgusting. Um, Especially in an environment like this. But like there were like actual like reasons for me to kind of suggest that maybe this wasn't he wasn't being entirely honest um with how he was feeling in these moments. But either way, he started essentially showing very odd signs and saying a lot of very odd things about hallucinations that he was having. Specifically, that he was seeing uh, traps. Like he was seeing traps. Just like I don't know the exactly what these were. I think they were. I think he at some point described them as like ropes on the ground, or like in the ceiling, or something. Um, and they were he was seeing traps. He was hallucinating traps, and like obviously there were no traps. But this is what he was claiming to see, and he was panicking a lot over this fact. And he was very, very, very worried about this. And it kind of sent him into a panic. And I think at some point during this panic, he started to believe that there were creatures trying to get to him or trying to harm him in some way. And so he kind of just went into complete breakdown mode, yelling and panicking and crying under the table. Which, again, keep in mind, we were in the small room today. So everyone was cramped in this tiny room while this was going on. Um, and eventually, staff members came in, kind of dealt with it. He was taken out for a bit to kind of deal with it and such, or for them to kind of deal with it, work it out with him, calm him down. I think this worked a little bit. But basically, eventually, he was taken out, and then our day kind of progressed more, and we got to go outside, which was nice. There was this little outside area fenced off. There was like a ball, a basketball hoop, uh, and again also like some soccer balls. There was no nets, like, but there was like a little area of grass, so like it was kind of like, like we got a ball, here's some grass. Goal is right there, goal is right there, like simple, whatever. You can play, you just need a ball to play soccer. Maybe the most simple sport that has ever been invented, like ever. Um, but either way, we're outside. I usually didn't involve myself too much in that because there was this little shaded area with some tables. I would usually just sit there and chat. I'm not a very sportsy type. And at some point, Chuck is brought back in, or is brought back while we're outside. By the way, I might get some specific details a little wrong because it was a little bit ago. It's a little fuzzy in my head, but generally speaking, I think that's when he came back. Either way, this is the next point where it's relevant that he's present, anyways. So whatever. Um, so then, what happened is Chuck seemed pretty fine. I mean, he was, he was clearly having some. He was clearly a little off still. Still having like a bit of issues, but he was generally uh, okay. He was doing fine enough. Like he could function, he could operate. He could talk, he could socialize. You could have a conversation with him essentially. But he was like visibly off, and eventually, as you might be able to predict, the issues started coming back. Um, and I think in this specific instance, he was seeing something that I don't remember. Like he had a name for it. He had a name for it. It was some dark, shadowy figure, monster thing. There was a name for it, and he claimed to have seen it in a history. He claimed to have read about it in a history book, or something. About it coming down in a meteor, onto Earth. I have no idea. But either way, he thought that this thing was coming after him, and it just reset the entire thing. Actually, I think it was probably worse. Um, and it really doesn't help that there were kids kind of triggering this or further triggering this issue. Because most of the kids here were fucking idiots. I'll be honest. Very insufferable, very annoying. They had issues, and I understand that, and that's why I'm not calling them bad people. But they were insufferable, admittedly. There were some really awesome people though that I actually kind of wish I still had contact with. They were kind of few and far between though, unfortunately. And this Chuck character, or I just called him a character. That's kind of rude. I don't know. I feel bad after saying that. This Chuck person. Um, he was generally a cool guy. He's actually one of the few people that I talked with regularly. I think he actually had a crush on me, which is kind of funny. There was actually another person who I'm 99% sure had a crush on me, so I guess I had that psych ward Riz, which is cool, I guess. Um, Either way, so he's taken away again, and this entire event has been extremely stressful for everyone involved. Clearly, so kind of like people generally aren't in the best mood today, and this is kind of thought to have been the worst thing that was going to happen, like. Because like how does it get worse than this, right? How does it get worse than this? And I think for most people that was kind of the worst thing that happened that day. But like for me, it was a bit worse than that. Uh, so eventually time comes, and time passes by, whatever, and we get into the gymnasium, and I think Chuck might be back at this point. I think he might be doing better at this point. He's now kind of irrelevant to the story. Well, he's not irrelevant to the story. Everything that happened is relevant, but like that moving forward, like as I guess someone actively doing stuff from this point forward, he's not very relevant. By the way, we entered the gymnasium. And as you could probably picture, I'm not in a great mood, given, what everything that had happened that day. Um, I'm not really feeling like basketball. I'm not really feeling like volleyball or they had badminton in this gymnasium, which was pretty fire. I played badminton a lot. I got that was actually really awful at it. I have terrible hand-eye coordination, but it was a lot of fun. It's actually maybe I'll go play badminton again sometime. It was fun. It was fun. It really was. But either way, as you could picture, I wasn't really in the mood for playing games, or really socializing at all. And so I was just kind of pacing around, because you were allowed to do that, like in these like kind of free time situations, like you were allowed to just like pace, be to yourself, um, and usually in these instances, which like these weren't like super rare instances where I didn't feel like doing anything, I would just grab my paper in my folder, and I would just doodle with a marker that I brought out, which I had forgotten to bring, unfortunately, and so it just kind of left to pace. And this is where I need to give a little bit more context about myself. Um, so first of all, I have always had issues with crowded areas and loud noises. I might be autistic. I was recommended to go get checked for diagnosis while I was in this stay, by the way, at this hospital. That's how who that's when I was told like, hey, you should probably go get checked for autism. I still haven't done that, unfortunately. I've just not been able to get around to that. There's just been a lot of life shit that I won't get into. But either way, I might have autism. I'm definitely very mentally ill in general. Um, and so this was a very bad environment for me to be in. Um, uh, and so the entire time I'm kind of there. And I'm trying not to give too many like personal details, or at least details about other people as well. But this entire time I'm here, I was kind of really relishing in the fact, or really dwelling on the fact that like this entire like situation that I'm in is entirely different from the one that I was promised. This was kind of framed as, hey, this is intensive care. This is where you're gonna get the help you need. This is gonna be just like a week or two of just like help and like getting you what you need, and that is very, very, very much so not what I was given. If how I describe my average day as, was telling of that. Um, and I was just really dwelling on this and really dwelling on the fact that I couldn't go home because again I'm a minor, and so I can't voluntarily leave. I once I admitted, even though I was voluntarily admitted, I did choose to go. I could not leave by myself because I'm a minor. I do not have the right to. Um, and so I was just kind of dwelling on the fact that like I'm just kind of stuck here. This fucking sucks. This is nothing like what I was told it would be. And this isn't helping me at all. And this is a giant waste of my time that's completely useless to me. This is just stress and nothing else. This is pointless. And also, again, everything else that has transpired as well was really not helping. Um, and so I was kind of pacing, and I was just like kind of progressively getting more and more worked up, and just fucking pissed at everything. And eventually kind of transcended just the just like being pissed off at my situation that I'm in right now, and also just getting pissed off at general, just the world, people in general. Um, and eventually I approached one of the staff members and said, hey, could I go to the safe room? Because in this facility there is a safe room or what is called a safe room, which is basically just a room with like a chair. It's like a nice rocking chair. It's actually pretty comfortable, and it's just nothing's in there other than like a window and a door, I guess, so that staff can like check on you. I think there's like a camera in there probably. I don't fully remember, but I can almost guarantee you there was, obviously. Um, and you know, it's just a place where you could just go isolate yourself if you're running into issues. If you just need space away from everyone. And this person who, by the way, I'm not putting much blame on this person, the staff member. I understand they were going through a lot this day. There is a lot going on. I am not upset at them. I am not blaming them for anything. I want to emphasize that they were generally a very, very nice person. And they were actually like one of my favorite staff members during my time here. But before I could even might finish my sentence, she just said no, just very firmly. And I tried to kind of elaborate a little bit, and then she just said no again before letting me finish elaborate. And it was not so much that she said no that pissed me off. It was more so just the attitude she had towards this, where, especially considering this entire thing of like this kind of safe room esque thing being a very preventative measure and being something where like, hey, if you need this, we will get this to you. And it wasn't really like up in the air. It was like, hey, this will happen. If you really need this, this can happen. And to just kind of the one time that I actually do need this, for that to be the response, was immensely frustrating. And I felt like I was being talked down to. Um, or maybe talked down to isn't the best word, but I made disregarded, I think, is maybe a better word, or invalidated. Um, and this inevitably just caused my emotions to bubble up even more, and eventually it boiled over. Inevitably and obviously for my situation, and I just ended up completely just fucking losing my shit, and I just punched a metal door, I think 7 times. I think it was 7 times, I think. I just punched this metal door full force. And keep in mind, this is a thick door. This is a thick door. Um, like a very, very, very thick door. Strong door. You know. So, my hand, not the prettiest after this. It was not the prettiest sight after this event took place. But obviously I didn't feel it until like a minute or two. Actually, probably like 2, 3, 4 minutes after, because of the adrenaline. But either way, obviously the entire place goes silent because someone just punched the shit out of a metal door. Go figure. Um, and eventually I just kind of like sat down. I just kind of sat down, and I remember someone, one of the other patients here, kind of approached me, asked if I was okay. We're gonna call him. I don't know. We don't need actually assign him a name. He's not relevant other than this point. He's a very nice person. He was one of the people who I actually really really liked here. And I could tell that he really cared about me. And I don't know what it was, but I just cried. I do not cry often. I don't like that about myself, by the way. I'm not saying that like crying is like bad. I actually think it's good. I don't like that I don't cry often, or that I'm not able to cry often. I think this is a generally bad trait that I have. Um, and I just started crying. Um, and this guy's very understanding. He's very cool, and he's like, yo, it's okay, just like fucking cry. Honestly, you don't even need to tell me what's going on, just like fucking cry. If you want to vent to me, you can. Uh, and eventually I kind of started venting to him a bit, but then this other guy came over, who had good intentions, by the way. And, he's kind of like, also trying to like kind of talk to me, but he's kind of like less aware of like how to deal with stuff like this. Um, so it kind of like took me out of venting. And I just kind of like, I just kind of went more. My headphone just disconnected from my computer because audio hasn't played from them in a while, and they're Bluetooth. But that doesn't matter. Uh, but either way, um, okay. So either way, I'm just in this chair now, and inevitably a staff member, a different staff member, by the way, comes over and asks what's going on. They're not like pissed off or anything. They're just concerned. Um, and I kind of like, she kind of asked, like, hey, do you want to go somewhere private so that we can discuss this? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so, we kind of walk out. The staff member who I had originally approached didn't even know this was going on. Like, she didn't even know this was going on. She didn't even realize that this happened. I don't think it was entirely her fault. I understand she was probably very stressed that day, for very reasonable, real reasons. Um, and she seemed genuinely taken aback by the fact that she didn't realize this because she usually would. And she's usually a very caring person. I'm not like throwing any shade to her. But either way, I go off with this person, to like this more private area, and we kind of like, chat, whatever. The specifics, I'm not gonna get into like the mini therapy session I had with this person, because not super relevant. But either way, stuff gets kind of sorted out, and we go kind of back to normal for a bit. Um, and so that's not the full story. There's still a lot of time. You probably noticed that there's probably a bit of time left in this video because even yet another awful fucking thing happened. Um, so, what then occurred after this was, we went back. Eventually, by the time that this had finished, the time at the gymnasium had finished up, we get about like an hour, until like we were going back to the room. And so I just was like, brought back to the room. Um, and it was pretty normal from there for like a while. Um, and I basically, we went back to the room, as in like the room that everyone was in, not like our rooms that like we slept in. Um, and what happened next happened later in the day. It was pretty okay from this point forward. I think there might have been like a little drama that happened. That's just fucking normal. That it happens constantly, in this place. As you could imagine, by shoving a bunch of extremely mentally ill teenage boys into a small cramped space. Go figure. Um, so but basically what happened next is, later in the day we had like kind of designated times for like phone calls. Well, it wasn't like designated times for phone calls, but like you could be called over to get a phone call at any time if someone was calling for you, like a family member. um it just usually happened later in the day, kind of naturally. um and so it was later in the day. It was pretty late in the day, actually. It was dinner time at this point in time when we were actually in our rooms. We were not like in the cafeteria. The cafeteria, because of like the whole boy girl separation thing, we kind of traded off turns of like actually going to the cafeteria and just having the food brought to the room. Complicated thing. I'm not gonna get into it. But anyway, we were in the room, uh, and the dinner so the food there was actually generally pretty good. Surprisingly, like much better than like the average hospital food. Like it was actually pretty solid food. Um, but I don't know. Either way. So this other guy who was actually my roommate, who I was talking about, piece of shit, or not piece of shit. Sorry, I don't want to call anyone a bad person in this situation because of personal issues, but very, very, very intolerably insufferable person. Everyone hated him. Like nobody liked this guy. He was such a fucking dickhead. Like even the people who were also dickheads also hated this guy. Like he was just like universally disliked, and for good reason. Um, but I won't get super into that. Um, Either way, he goes off to get called, or he gets a phone call. And he was sitting next to me at this point in time because like even though he was a massive dickhead, we still like chatted. We were still generally like he was actually one of the people who I kind of chatted with the most. Who I kind of had like most of I mean I chatted with everyone like a pretty good bit just kind of naturally. But like I mean we were roommates and also I think for some reason he like took a liking to me. I don't know why. Again, I think it's just because I was generally inoffensive outwardly, or I'm usually generally inoffensive outwardly most of the time towards most people. Um, but essentially, what happened is he got called off to get a call. And, obviously nobody's thinking anything because this happens all the time. He comes back, horrible fucking mood. Sits down next to me. He's like starts to cry. And I ask, "Hey, what's going on?" And he replies that he got a phone call saying that his mom just died. Which immediately like, fuck, like goddamn, that's fucking horrible. Um, that's like maybe the single worst outcome that could have ever possibly happened from that phone call. What made it even worse is that his sister was telling him, and she kind of just actively blamed him for everything, which was just like really fucked up and shitty. Um, it's just like really fucking awful thing for her to have done, even if like yes, like he wasn't a very good kid. I mean he was actually here from I think he was brought here from a juvenile facility for something. I don't remember what. And he was going back after he was going to leave the hospital. Um, for her to do that in that moment is just completely fucked. Um, and just completely inexcusable. Um, and he starts crying quite a lot, obviously, clearly. And this affects me pretty strong, and kind of surprisingly, I don't think I would usually have as strong of a reaction to this as I usually would if it weren't for everything in the day prior. That just every single like hour of this day was just new stress and new stress and new stress, and it was just so fucking terrible the entire day, and just climaxed at this moment with just literally the worst possible thing that could have happened. Um, and eventually, obviously he's having a lot of problems. I think he had left the room for some reason. I don't exactly remember what. And I'm kind of pacing around, visibly upset at this. I think I was probably much more affected than everyone else here. Uh, and there was this kid. I don't remember his name. God bless him. We're gonna call him. I don't know, Zach. I'm gonna call him Zach. He was this very, very, very unwell kid. Never talked outside of very, very few words. I don't know exactly what was going on. I think I briefly overheard something about psychosis. He had a lot of issues. Like, he would see things. I know that. I know like there was one time where like he was freaking out because he thought a giant spider was on my leg. Um, he was clearly very unwell. But one thing he did all the time was, and one thing he loved, and it was kind of almost his main form of communication, is that he would just hug people. Like he would just hug people. He just go up to you, like put out his arms for a hug, and he would hug you. Like I mean, like everyone was like very accepting of this. Like surprisingly for like the type of people who were here, everyone was just kind of like, yo, this guy's awesome. He's sick. He's super cool. Everyone loved him. Everyone loved him. Like everyone, including the staff, like everyone loved him dearly so much. Cause he was awesome. He was awesome. He was the best guy there. Um, That includes me in that statement. Um, that sounded narcissistic. I was trying to, say, okay, whatever. Um, and I don't know if he knew I was upset, but either way, he just went out for a hug, and I gave him a hug. And I don't know, and I guess like that, I don't know, just the act of this hug just made me just completely fucking break down. Like every single bit of stress from that day just came out just all at once in that moment. Just all at once. After this hug. And I just start just gross sobbing. Um and like he seems pretty taken aback by this. Probably pretty clearly. You know, but either way, I think he's, generally sympathizes with me. Again, it's kind of hard to tell what he's thinking at all times. But I think that he generally seemed sympathetic, if not, if surprised. And, there was a few other people who were kind of giving me support who I also knew, who I talked to kind of regularly, and I was just completely fucking breaking down. Like, I was just having such a fucking awful time, just like sobbing. This is probably the hardest I've cried in, like, I don't know, like the past like 10 years. Maybe not like 10, but like probably since I was like 9 or so, 9 or 8. Probably since I like lost my grandma, which was like around 7, or 6. I don't fully remember how old I was. I think it was around 7. But probably the hardest I've ever cried since then. Um, and just like fuck, like in all fairness, it felt kind of good. Um, like at least after the fact, having cried. Which is why crying is good, and why you shouldn't suppress that emotion and that feeling. It gets all the emotion out. But either way, yeah, that happens. Eventually, I talk to some staff. You know, I eventually am kind of like allowed to kind of stand out of the room, kind of have a little time to myself, not go into the safe room. I think someone might have been in there, but either way, I think they also kind of just wanted to keep an eye on me, make sure I was doing okay. Uh, and eventually, I was eventually offered this. I think it was some anti-anxiety pill. I had already calmed down a little bit, but I was still like pretty in a really, really awful mood. And they were kind of like, "Hey, you want something to help with this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever." Because like usually I'm not usually super for taking medication. This is just a personal preference of mine. I'm not judging anyone for taking medication. I just personally don't. I just generally try not to. I just generally, personally, don't like taking it. Um, but in this instance, like I just stopped giving a shit about everything. I was just like, yeah, just fucking give me whatever if it'll make me feel a bit better. It might have been a benzo. I think I might have done benzos. It was a very, very, very tiny pill, which kind of makes me think it was just a very small dose of a benzo because I had taken it. Um, and eventually we were actually going to go. We went to the gymnasium again. Weirdly, um, which is not normal for like one day to go twice. But I think just because of everything going on, I was kind of like, let's just fucking go do this again. And I spent the entire time just like sitting down, just kind of thinking. I didn't really want to talk to anybody. Uh, and I wasn't like pissed, by the way, at this point. Probably also maybe a bit because of the medication. But like the reason why I'm saying it might have been a benzo is because when it was time to go, I stood up and I almost fell on my ass. I was feeling that bitch. I was feeling that bitch hard, or not super hard. It's not like I just like popped a Xan. But like I was feeling it. I was feeling it. I don't know what they gave me. I genuinely have no idea. I think they might have told me what it was, but I forgot it. Um, Either way, I do think it probably was some sort of benzo or a similar drug. Um, by the way, it did actually help. In this instance, it was a very small dose. It's not like it was something that was gonna get me super hooked on it. Either way, you know, eventually, day's kind of wrapping up. We go back to our rooms. Keep in mind, I'm sharing a room with the guy whose mom just fucking died. Um, I kind of say like, yeah, today was fucking ass. And he said like, hey, yo, no offense, but mine was probably worse than yours. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. Like, yeah, you're probably pretty right about that. And to be fair, I didn't say that in reference to like say like, oh, my day's so ass. Your day, like, I don't care about like what you're feeling. Um, like like woe is me, whatever. But well, venting to the person who's told that their mom just fucking died. Um, you know, that wasn't my intention with saying that, but like he was also very correct in that response, I think. And I also wasn't thinking fully clearly because I clearly was under the effect of some substance, whatever the hell that was. Um, and eventually, we went to sleep. The next day wasn't as eventful, fortunately. It was. I don't think it was drama free, but it was certainly not as bad as that day. But like that was by a very large margin the worst day I had in that facility. Um, so yeah. Uh, subscribe to Gunk.